I just wanted to say one thing. These two crazy ex-wives of mine have me pulled away from my focusing on my healing. From my mom. But I was just sitting here thinking how. I mean, I still think it to this day. It's weird, like the whole crucifixion of Jesus. As a child, I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed to God. And I told him that I would trade the suffering that Jesus had dying on a cross for the suffering that I was going through as a child. That's how bad it was. I prayed that prayer over and over and over and over and over and over. Because I remember reading in the Bible, Jesus had a pretty cush life, man. He had 12 buddies. He traveled to Kemet. He traveled all over the fucking place, man, learning all kinds of ancient knowledge and wisdom. And I mean, he had a hell of a fucking life, dude. Really cush fucking nice life. Until like the last, whatever it was, few months. And, you can't say, oh, well, everybody hated him. Everybody hates me, bitch. You know how many fucking altercations I've been in with the fucking government? It's fucking unreal. So Jesus only had like a few days of actual suffering, right? And I always thought, because they would always beat that into us. Oh, Jesus, I remember my mom just crying. Jesus died on the cross. And I just remember being like, I couldn't understand. Like, I knew there was so much more suffering in this world. And it just didn't make sense to me. I mean, like, even movies you would watch, like, people would get... And I'm like, man, how is that taking on the sin of the world because this guy just died a regular death? Like, there were people next to him that died exactly the same way he did, But everybody's like, oh, Jesus died. And, man, I just remember as a kid just praying, just being in so much torturous suffering that there was no way out of. Being 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, running away, having to come back, being forced back by the cops. 13 years old, miserable. 13, I mean the torture, pain, nasty, nasty shit. 13, 14 years old. Ran away again. Got brought back by the cops again. And I gave up. I was like, that's it. My life's over. And then got away at 16. And the way I got away was I had to tell, my aunt came and picked me up, from my job. And brought me home. My mom immediately, she was getting the cops. Because my aunt called her and said, hey, your son's here. He's going to stay here. My mom said, fuck that if he is. I'm calling the cops right now to get him. My aunt said, Richard, do you have any reason why the cops would keep you here? And I said, yeah, I remember that one time when I was completely fucked, guys. My face was complete. Everybody remembers that time. I said, remember that one time when I was all beat up? I said, yeah. She said, yeah. I said, that wasn't a fight with a bunch of people. That was my mom whooped my ass. And she called my mom back and she said, Tina, don't, I suggest you just leave this alone. And my mom did. And it was never questioned. Nothing was ever questioned. Nothing was ever questioned. We went on, I just went on like normal. But yeah, man, that was just such a slap in the face growing up and like my whole life. Like, are you fucking kidding me? This dude suffered for 3 days and died on a cross, and you guys are worshiping the fuck out of him and crying because of suffering? Fuck you pieces of shit. What about my fucking suffering? What about the trillions of people throughout history suffering? What about the billions of people suffering right now? What about the billions upon billions of people suffering right now? What about them? not just for 3 days of their life. They don't get to live a full life of niceties and just, a family and learning a trade and traveling the world and learning esoteric knowledge, and then, coming back and getting 12 friends and hanging out and going around and preaching what you want to say to everybody, and then having 3 or 4 days of torture and death. I'm sure there's billions and billions and billions of people alive right now that would gladly trade spots with this Jesus any fucking day, any day of the week. So yeah, that never made sense to me, man. I remember just praying, begging God to sacrifice me like he did his own son. Please just get this pain, get this suffering over with. I'm done. I didn't want to deal with it. It was terrible. I was severely depressed as a child. Severely depressed. Hours I would spend praying. Hours. I remember crying by myself, just praying for it to end. Praying for my abuse to end. For some help to come. We were trapped. We grew up on a cabin in the middle of the woods up on top of a mountain where there wasn't really anybody else around. We had a friend that lived behind us, but trapped. And from a young age, my abuse was covered up by churches, by grown men. So as a boy, I thought I was like, okay, I guess. These churches are cesspools. These churches are cesspools of sociopaths and degradants, I guess. I don't even know how to say the word, but like nasty people, evil people of society. They love these churches. Yeah, but what about you? What about you? Have you lived a life of pain and suffering? Would you trade your whole life of pain and suffering for a life and know that you're going to die at 35 years old for a life of pretty much good stuff, but three days at the end of it of torture and death? I would. Hands down. Hands fucking down. There's no fucking question. Do you want 3 days of torture? Or do you want 3,000 days of torture? Shit, 3,000 days is what, 8 years? Fuck, dude. And they keep on gaslighting you, and acting like your suffering is nothing and that it's meant for a great God who has your best in his mind. Bullshit, man. Trillions of people have suffered and died and lived lives of suffering throughout history. Trillions and trillions and trillions of people. Lives of suffering. What, for a few Christians who are going to heaven? Why would God create such a world? That doesn't make any sense. That sounds like a fairy tale. It sounds like such a stretch of the imagination. The only way I could believe that is if I was told that when I was a little child. That's the only way I could believe that. It's so out there and ludicrous. It's such a crazy thing to think. It's such a self-righteous thing to think that you just happen to stumble across the one religion and the one way and the way to do that religion, and everybody else is doing it wrong. It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous to think that the only way to salvation is through some book that half the world doesn't even know about. Half the people, what about all the people in North Korea? They're just, North Koreans are automatically going to hell. They're automatically, all North Koreans, straight to hell. Chinese, straight to hell. All these Arabs, straight to hell. Send everybody straight to hell. Oh, man. It's so ludicrous to me.